Hey everybody, welcome back to the Audiomo Podcast, episode 16, with my co-host Dave Nelson. It has been a little bit. I know you're a little frustrated. I'm going to let you get some venting out of the way, Dave. How are you?
Oh, just tired. We got a lot of stuff going on. We're wrapping up. Actually, excitingly, we are wrapping production on the album this week. I had one last little thing of some acoustic tracking to do for the album. We finished that up on Thursday, and so now I'm in cleanup mode. And I have been going through the sessions and deleting files and renaming things and color coding and all that fun stuff. That's been my last 2 weeks. But just a little tired. How about you?
I'm doing really good, and I actually want to talk a lot about recording guitars and that kind of stuff because I've been tracking this week as well. I knew that you were wrapping up and doing all sorts of the extracurricular stuff that I personally hate doing. You seem to enjoy it a little bit more than I do most of the time when it comes to the kind of EPK stuff, the filming of the videos, all the merch. I hate that stuff. So I would like to talk about just guitars and guitar recording in general. So the first place I want to start here, what guitar in general, because you're like me, you have a bunch of guitars. What guitar do you reach for first for a bass line on any given project, and why?
It actually changed recently, and it changed because of you, because I bought that PRS S2 from you. But my go-to in the studio always used to be the PRS SE Custom Semi-Hollow that I have, and it's just because it's got the classic Duncans in it, but they're splittable, and it's semi-hollow, and it sounds great. So it's a nice bass line for just, I get the humbucker sound out of it, but if I need a single coil sound out of it, I can just split it and I get the single coil. And for me, who's usually doing something heavy, like, I don't care that it's not really a true single coil sound. It gets me enough of what I want, that kind of like springy distortion, sort of genty kind of thing that we're usually going for. And I really had no problem with that being the go-to. And then I got the S2 and it just plays better. Just slightly, like they're both great guitars, and I still use the semi-hollow when I want that kind of like bigger Foo Fighters kind of chord sound thing going on. But I definitely gravitate to the S2 first. Plus, it's bright, it's pink, it feels good. It's just a cool guitar. So I start there, and then depending on the mood, it switches, right? As I'm sure it does with you. But yeah, it always starts with the S2.
That's a good choice, and I think that's really appropriate. And one of the reasons that I mentioned this question first is because a lot of the times when people talk about this topic, they're immediately going to go to which guitar they have is the most versatile. That's kind of how they're going to answer the question. You kind of already implied you're similar to me in the sense that you want something that you feel very confident with first. Like as far as the feel of it, you feel really just as comfortable playing the instrument, something where you're not struggling with it, that's just familiar. And on top of that, that will sound really good and do a lot of things really, really well. So for me, it's always been a Telecaster, but I haven't had like the legitimate Telecaster since I sold the custom shop one. I've had a bunch in between, and I've used some of the made in Japan ones on records, but I haven't actually just like had like a Telecaster for me. I tried to build one, and it just didn't work out for me. But what I found this week is, I don't know if this is a permanent change, but out of all the guitars I have, the one that I found myself keep going back to when I was recording was the 77 guitar. And it blows my mind because I look at what I have. That's probably the cheapest one out of everything. But it's just something about that guitar. Maybe it's just the 335s in general, but maybe it's not because I played some of those and I don't feel the same way about it. It's just the playability on top of the fact that it does do really good cleans and that kind of vintage stuff. But then when I want it to get like much dirtier, it does things that a Telecaster can't do to the same kind of level. You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, so question for you, because I have this same feeling about my even semi-hollow, right? Do you ever feel like you're hindered by the fact that it's a hollow body? Like, does that affect the sound in a way or put you in a spot or feel less versatile because of it?
No, I actually think it's the opposite. I think it does more. I think that because of the music that I play, there's a lot of space. Like there's not a ton of like layered guitars and stuff like that. So a lot of the chords I use, They sound a little bit better if there's not as much strumming, unless I'm doing straight up like funk, like Corey Wong / rhythm kind of stuff, which, I've always kind of done that in the background anyways. But when I'm like hitting out big open notes and just letting things really resonate, I feel like I'm at an advantage from a bass line to begin with because it's such a big sounding instrument and it doesn't sound dark. I think that's one of the problems I've had with semi-hollows. They sound a little bit darker when you're actually hearing them in the context of a mix. But this one, whatever they did, this is a very, very cutty, very, 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 very precise kind of instrument in that aspect. It's kind of like a gigantic Telecaster. I really can't describe it any other way other than that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because, I think I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, but we had a member leave the band kind of halfway through this whole process, and we had recorded everything, and I had already recorded everything probably like 75-25, leaning towards using the semi-hollow. And then when we went back and we kind of listened to everything and we, were sort of evaluating what to do after the member left, like, we were kind of saying like, yeah, everything here is pretty dark and it kind of like, it works if there's a lead guitar going over it and it's kind of filling some of that upper space, but on its own, unless we're talking like a drastic amp sound tone, I'm going to have to, I had to redo stuff. And then I ended up kind of being sort of like this 80, 75-25 split again, but now back to the S2. I don't feel like I had that problem at all, when I was retracking with the S2. So yeah, I definitely say almost 75% of the record is with the S2, which is cool. I expected to be hopping around a little bit more. And then, like you said, for me, it's first about comfort, right? About what thing I can get, the stuff out the best played that I want to get it out. And then I have the added benefit of this probably being the most versatile guitar that I have because of the fact that it's got the humbuckers and it splits, and they're decent sounding humbuckers that don't lean towards one kind of field of sound more than the other, right? They're pretty well rounded, but not in the usual, shitty at everything kind of PRS sound, but yeah, so it's interesting that you said that because I don't even think I really thought about it being the semi-hollow, PRS thing that was causing that problem. I thought, it was just because like I knew there was going to be a lead guitar, so we just play a little darker to give him room, which is probably a combo of the two,
Yeah, and it's something that I learned over time, and part of the reason why I never had a 335 long term. I'd always kind of, with those guitars, we talk about this, and we're not going to be hyping too much on prices and stuff like that, but one of the reasons I never had a 335 is because of how expensive I thought a real one was going to cost me compared to, like a Tele and stuff like that. You can get away with a lot cheaper variant, but when it comes to a instrument like a quality semi-hollow body, more often than not, you're going to be spending a lot of money on it. So the ones that I did have experience with playing had a lot of those characteristics of the darkness where you would need the Telecaster anyways, or the Jaguar, which is, those are my two main guitars when I'm recording kind of like two guitar sets up, to be the one that sits on top because they cut really well. And in this specific instrument, the 77, it does both of those kinds of aspects of the field of sound so well. It's been so eye-opening to me because normally, yes, it's a Telecaster, but my first inkling was to go to the Les Paul and kind of have a similar approach to yours, although mine doesn't have the coil split on it. But at the end of the day here, when I was listening to everything back to back between the humbucker guitars, the one that by far sounded, the best is like the all-arounder was the 77. And I just thought that was something that was worth noting because it just goes to the old adage of it doesn't necessarily matter how much an instrument costs or is worth. It's about what works for you and, the music that you're playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I really do think at the end of the day, it comes down to the guitar that allows you to play the thing you want the easiest. And whether that's through sound or through playability, sometimes one wins over the other, right? Like, especially with what we do where it's kind of like, big, heavy stuff, lots of distortion or whatever, like, maybe the sound's not as important as me being able to, rip out the chords the way I want them to, or for the guitar to resonate the way I feel like it's supposed to when I'm, deep into it. And, I can shape it later if I really need to, I mean, obviously there's kind of lines there, right? Like I did, one of the tracks is all with my Ibanez Tallman, which is, Ibanez's basic, their Tele basically. And it's just because it's supposed to be that kind of like clean, dirty pushed sort of sound. And, you can't really do that without a single coil, I think, like a real one, not just a split one. So like, even though I don't like that guitar as much as I like the PRSs, you have to do that. But, if I could have done it with the PRSs, I would have. And I actually tried a couple of times beforehand, but neither of them like being in C. So, it's, it's kind of you get it where you can. But my point is I think that like the tone thing can, especially in a studio setting, you can always rework stuff to make it work the way you need to. But you can't rework a shittily played take.
Yes, and I think that's part of the reason the Jaguar is my favorite Fender out of all of them, and why it's so important to me, even though it's not nearly as versatile as a 335 style instrument or, some of the other ones that we're talking about, like a Telecaster. The thing about the Jaguar, and the Jazzmaster is the same thing, but between the two of them, I just like the Jaguar better. The fact that I have so much experience in just with the way I can manipulate that specific vibrato system. I play the best if I'm tracking on one of those. Like, I can play the vibrato on a Strat. I can play a Bigsby on a different guitar, or even the Mustang, like that vibrato. Like, I could make it work, but I don't have that confidence that I have because I played the Jazzmaster and the Jag for so long now that whenever I do need to have that kind of vibrato in the song, and it's like a vital part of it, especially with these kind of classic kind of tones, there's no other guitar I can go to other than, the Jag. So for me, I just wish it would do a little bit more, but I also kind of appreciate the fact that it doesn't. Like,
sure.
I like the fact that it's just like, it's the king at like 3 or 4 things that I really love, but then for, the all-arounder, it doesn't need to be that. And that's kind of the appeal of having a bunch of different guitars, I guess, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I got into, obviously when I bought a new guitar and bought the third PRS, right, I had to explain to my wife, like, no. Every guitar player I know owns at least 8 guitars, right? So like, I just hit 8, so I think I think we're doing good. But I'm curious. You said you hate doing all the kind of the after stuff when you're prepping a record. Like, what does your session prep look like now that I'm kind of like, balls deep in a bunch of session cleanup? I'm curious how other people take care of it when you're prepping stuff to send off to people. What's your go-to? How detailed are you getting, or how much cleanup are you doing, or are you just letting them deal with a big ass mess when they get a session?
I am meticulous. I try to have everything as cut and as simple as possible because I am a very particular person. And my problem has been in the past when I don't do that, or I just play my part and somebody else is in charge of sending the session out and doing that kind of stuff. When it comes back, things that I wanted absolutely no business even being considered to be put into a mix are like prominent in the mix. And I'm like, why is that there? Like that doesn't belong there. It's just, I don't know. So for me, I like having a little bit more control over it. And I know I'm in a unique position with that because 99% of the stuff I do, I'm doing the drums for it as well. So, I kind of need the two of them to match. I do some bass work, but, really, it's just me doing the guitars and the drums, like 99% of the time. So, I have to have those where I want them. And the other stuff, like, it is what it is. Like, little tweaks can be made here and there, but, the bass is the bass. There's not a whole lot of cutting with that. That's a one-take kind of thing, unless you really need a punch, like, for a specific part or a effect that you need in a certain part of the song. And the vocals, do whatever the hell you want with the vocals at that point. I'm not the singer. That's not my problem.
Yeah. It's weird. I'm remembering, I don't know, maybe, I think it was the last record. I sent a session over, and at the end of the song had a big, ring out, right? So, hit the guitars on a big open chord. It's just going. And, as you do when you're recording, you let it go as long as you possibly can let it go. And then you cut it and you do a fade or whatever, where you feel like it's supposed to come in, and I just like sent him off the session with the long thing or whatever. And like, he just left it. And I'm like, wow, that's really weird. Like, like it went on for like 30 seconds, at the end or whatever. Like, why would he do that? I have no idea. But then I realized like, oh, like sometimes these are the kinds of situations where you're like, oh, I have to like cut it and do the fade, or he's just going to be like, nope, this is what they wanted, like, and nothing against him. Like maybe I did want that. Maybe I was like, oh, this is going to overlap into the next track and we're going to like master them together or so. I don't know, whatever. It could have been for some reason, but like now I'm going through and going like, okay, I got to do all the fades for any places that need to have fades, that I feel like they need to be a specific type or specific length or specific like, logarithmic drop or whatever. And like now I'm going in making sure everything's like all cleaned up. I've been debating whether or not I should strip silence my toms for him or if I'm going to like let him do that. I don't know if he gates on his own or what. It's just like there's so many, especially because he works in Pro Tools and I can send him a Pro Tools session. It's embarrassing to get a session that looks like shit, like when you get one and it's like there's names everywhere and there's just stuff cut all over the place and like nothing's organized and you get like triples of everything or like a bass in stereo that's split left and right for I'm like, so I can't fathom the idea of sending someone else a session that looks like that,
Yeah, I'm so in the same boat as that, and it drives me absolutely crazy. And it's part of the reason that I got out of wanting to mix almost immediately because I got like 10 sessions all in a row right out of school. And I was just like, I'm like, oh my God, nobody has any idea what they're doing. And I do not want to hold people's hands. So I didn't want to do it. So I don't know. It's funny though, because with some things, like I don't send sessions to people unless it's for mixing. I think the only other person I sent you, what did I do? The Zelza? You mixed the Zelza, right?
But it was like 6 tracks, so it was like...
But I'm saying, but that's like the only time I was like, I don't give a shit. I'm like, I'm going to send him like the easiest thing. I think it was 4 drum tracks, 1 bass track, and a bunch of guitars that were all just already where they needed to be. And that was me being lazy. So I don't know. But one thing I would like to give people advice for, because I know that a lot of people that I talk to that follow this channel, some of them don't have a lot of experience with sending out sessions and really working on stuff like that. And we always talk about guitar tones and which guitar is going to work and this kind of internal kind of debate that we have as guitar players. One piece of advice that I would like to give: don't send a session with the same part played on like 5 guitars. That is never going to end well. I mean that. You laugh, but you know exactly what I'm talking about, because it's happened to everybody. We've done it before. It just creates these headaches. The best thing you can do, depending on the style of music that you're playing, but if you're playing something that's like clean, you don't need to send more than 2 of the same part, like ever. I can't think of another scenario where you would need to do that. That's just personal advice.
Well, you do it for choruses and stuff, but we're using tons of distortion and it's like layering in, and again, I put that fully up at the discretion of the guy that we're sending it to. Like he might just use the 2, that would be totally fine. I send him, so I have my main 2 guitars that basically go through the whole track, and that's the tone that I'm like relying on. And I know that tone is good enough that if I just had it on its own, it would be totally fine. And then I also do another pass, like depending on the style of chorus or something. For the chorus, we'll double up and go, I'll do something like in the middle position or whatever if I just want some more body and warmth. And it's with a totally different amp and it's reinforcing, and it's like, if this is gone, it's fine. If it's there, we're adding some extra stuff or whatever. But I honestly think that the best thing to do is just label, right? Like, because I don't want to, at the end of the day, like get 8 tracks of the same guitar and then realize like one was the actual chords you wanted and the other one was like weird voicings of the chords that were supposed to like reinforce, and then I just went like meh, and I muted the one that you wanted or whatever, So like even with these, I'm going through and I'm telling him exactly what amp I used on each one of them. Like, I think it's very obvious in the hierarchy of like where the things are and how the tracks are labeled, like which ones are dubs and which ones are important and which ones are overlays and which ones are reinforcement versus like the main guitar line. So it's, any idiot, like a kid, can look at the session and be like, oh, this is the main guitar line and these are the reinforcement pieces or whatever. Because like at the end of the day, if I don't know what you were doing, I don't know what you were doing, so you got to tell me. And yeah, a bunch of messy guitar tracks never works out well. One, it's a big mess sonically, and 2, it's a big mess visually. And then I just end up doing something that you didn't want me to do,
Yeah, and that's pretty much the the point. Oh, I was going to say juxtaposition, but that was going to bring me onto a totally different tangent, which I'm going to stray off of for just a second here. But the point is, a lot of people will make this mistake. They'll see somebody like you who works with a lot of distorted guitars. In a scenario like that where you want it to be larger than life, it makes sense to have all these different kinds of things all over the place and panned in all these different places and little effects on certain things for certain parts and different voicings. This stuff makes sense. But some people will send like a blues track that will have 12 guitars on. Like, what the hell are you doing? When did you ever hear a Gary Moore song or a Clapton song or a Stevie Ray Vaughan song where, you know, he quadruple or quintuple track the same part? That's just not how this goes. So
right.
I think that the less that you can do, it says a lot more in the song itself, especially for cleaner style genres and just for your playing in general. Another thing is just don't overplay. And just one thing that I picked up over the years here. When I'm demoing, I don't do this as much because everyone wants to hear like how the guitar is going to sound when they're going to play it. Most people just play bar chords. I don't use the E or the A string very much at all for rhythm work. Very rarely do I do it. I try to use those two places as a space for the kick drum and the bass drum to live on their own. So that way the guitar, I feel like it also adds this benefit of having the guitar step up even a little bit more because it's focused so much more on those other four strings.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I was going to say, kind of to your point, like when I'm building walls of sound and choruses or breakdowns or whatever, like, you know, we have one doing the main rhythm, the riff, and then like the next two are like an inversion of the chords, right? That are, you know, next couple strings up or next octave up or whatever. Like I'm filling space. I'm going, okay, that, you know, big riff is handling low end and, you know, mostly mid range, right? And then bass is handling low end, and then I need something to fill up the next chunk of it. So it's going to be, you know, second inversion chords or whatever, like hitting some notes and some frequencies that the other one wasn't. And then on top of that, I'm doing super high middly string stuff like that could almost be a violin line or a string line or something, right? And that's getting distorted like crazy. It's getting a bunch of delay, maybe an octave pedal with a couple of octaves up and down or whatever, just to turn it into, you know, a big thing, right? It's never 6 of the same line on top of each other. Like that just turns into nothing, you know, very quickly. So yeah, to your same point too, especially if you're looking for something with like space, or if you're really saying like, I want this guitar to stick out, the best way to do it is to, you know, have it live in its very own spot, which like you're saying can be D string and up, everything else is below it. And it's very prominent right in the center.
Yeah, and it's just all about finding balance for the track. It's a lot different when you're just playing the songs along, or even when you're just in the pre-production process and you're just laying down scratch tracks and you start to have the other instruments put in. All of a sudden things can start to sound muddy, and it's one thing that a lot of people, when they're starting to learn how to mix, they're like, why does this sound so bad? And it's just because you have so many things trying to occupy the same space, and that's just going to cause a lot of problems. One trick, like I said, just try to give everything its own space. You don't need to be like a professional engineer to just have a really basic, decent sounding mix if you're able to identify what instruments are going to be strong, and especially with the guitars, knowing where, you know, their sweet spots are.
Yeah, it's a problem I see in a lot of young bands off the gate, especially in the metal community, where it's like everybody wants to be like really cinematic and really like, you know, tons of stuff going on or whatever. Like, you know, I've worked with plenty of metal bands that'll be like, you've got drums that are literally like blast beating through the whole thing, which is taking up so much space sonically, right? Because like your snare's going constantly, you've got double bass going constantly, which basically completely crushes any space for your bass. And then the bass is doing, you know, crazy shit, and they've got like, you know, like just massive amounts of distortion on the bass. So now you've got bass on the low end, and then you've also got all this high end crunch, and then you've got a rhythm guitar that's chugging along and never has any breathing room, and then you've got a lead guitar that's going on top, and it's just screaming, you know, all of the high frequency stuff. And then they're like, oh, we've got strings, and oh, we've got choirs, and oh, we've got all this stuff, and it's like, okay, we've got all that in here, and I can kind of make that work when it's instrumental, but then you put a vocal in the middle of it, and it's just like there's no room for anything. And I mean, a skilled mix engineer can make room. Obviously, we've all heard records that have all that stuff going on that work, but it's because also the great bands that do that well know when to give those things space and where to let those things breathe properly. And it's definitely a skill you have to learn, is to go, okay, I have to anticipate for these, you know, extra instruments that I'm throwing in here, and like give them room to be their own thing. I mean, your brain just can't focus on that many things at one time, you know? So it's definitely a learned skill to do correctly, and easier to just not do it than it is to try to figure out how to pull it off. And then, you know, as you get better at going, you know, realizing the space you can work in, then you get better at realizing where there's empty space that can be filled by other things rather than trying to find space for stuff. It's easier to say, you know, there already is space, where can I put something, rather than being like, I've got all these things and I got to arrange them correctly, you know?
Yeah, it's just like a jigsaw puzzle. It's easier to just piece it together slowly and not just jam all the pieces together on the board and say, figure it all out. It's not too dissimilar to that. But I would like to transition to something. We were talking about that pink PRS, and I really stood by this. And now that you've had it long enough, you know I wasn't lying when I said this. That is the only non-core PRS where the pickups were freaking perfect for that guitar out of the box.
Yeah. Weirdly, amazingly. Like I said, I had a McCarty a long time ago, and that is an expensive guitar. It was a nice guitar, and it had god awful. They were the Dragons, and they were just terrible. They were just, you know, middling at everything. And it was like, I just can't understand why they still do it. You know, you still have these guitars that start at like 18, or even the custom shops sometimes too, that just have their pickups in them, and they just sound so trashy. And it's not, I just can't understand spending that kind of money on a PRS knowing I'd have to rip the pickups out of it, you know?
Well, it's been long enough. I can finally come clean about this. I had never been so, well, not never been, but one of the most disappointing gear purchases I made. I had the pink PRS still at the time when I ordered the blue McCarty 594. That was the most gorgeous top. It was the scale length I wanted. I was just like, and I was assuming that it was going to have the same kind of like fidelity that the pink one had. And when I was playing them back to back, I'm just sitting there in the room like, fuck, I made a mistake. Like, I made a mistake. And I'm not the kind of person to return like a guitar like that. So I'm like, I'm going to just rip out the pickups. I'll figure it out. But it really just blew my mind to think that those two guitars are similar, like to an extent. I know that yours is a 25-inch scale length and the McCarty 594 is a 24.594 scale length. Yeah. And yours just has the stop tail. It doesn't have the two pieces to the bridge, right?
Yeah, it just has the wraparound, yeah.
Yeah, it just has a wraparound. And yes, but other than that, I mean, still single cut guitars. I thought that it would be a lot closer, at least as good, you know, and it was a newer model, but no, it was so disappointing.
I wonder if it's like, you know, it's weird because for me, I wouldn't have thought I made a mistake. I would have thought like, I got to do a thing. And I wonder if that kind of like thought process goes into why they make that choice, where they're just like, look, some people buy these and they're fine with them. And the people who buy them, they won't be like, I bought the wrong guitar. They'll be like, I have to replace the pickups. It's you know, we talked about this before. Like, it's not a deal breaker to replace pickups. It's just obnoxious to do on a guitar that costs that much, right? So it's like, out of all the things that could be wrong with a guitar, pickups that sound shitty is kind of like best case scenario because it's pretty easily fixable, right? You know, I mean, I guess other than like a loose knob or something, right? You know, but yeah, I do love this guitar, and it has been the only PRS I've played so far that I really liked. Obviously, the SEs that, you know, the new one that I've got and the old one that I had, the stock pickups are terrible, just muddy messes. But this has been great. The only thing I don't like about it is the Les Paul style 4-way knob control. I hate that, and it's just a thing of like, been playing live guitars long enough that it's like when I play a guitar, I just want to pull the volume and I want to kill it no matter where I am, and it pisses me off that I always pull the neck volume and it's not the right one.
That's such a, you know what, that's a you complaint though, because that is such a non-issue.
But why would you want two volumes? I just don't. Although actually I did just watch a very interesting it was Rob Scallon doing the interview with the guy who plays guitar for Britney Spears, and he said he basically just leaves his neck pickup off, and he uses the switch as a kill switch to like abruptly end songs, essentially, because he's pretty much always just on the neck for what he's doing. And insanely, he plays an SG, which is crazy. But anyway, I don't ever feel like there's a need for me to have two volume switches or two volume pots. I mean, I just want one to control them both, and it's very annoying that there's two. I know I'm not the only one who feels this way.
I know that, but let me give you something that you could try out. You live on the bridge pickup, obviously, when you're playing on the big. So try this: have the neck pickup already split, and then have the volume rolled off to about 7 or 8. Okay, when you want to go into a clean, switch to the middle position.
Use it as like a cleanup. Yeah. I get you. Yeah.
It's very useful to do that. There's a lot of things people don't think outside the box with that. They're like, a lot of the times people will complain about the tone of their instrument without touching the tone knob or the volume knob a little bit, because you can, especially with quality audio pots. I mean, this is vital at this point. If you don't have quality potentiometers, you're not going to be able to take full advantage of this. But if you either invest in them in a guitar that doesn't already have them, or you have a guitar that has them as standard, you make use of that stuff. You will find tones that's like the sweet spot. And you have to remember, the only reason that the Stratocaster went from having a 3-way switch to a 5-way switch was because somebody was screwing around with the position, and they accidentally found that spot where it combined the neck pickup and the bridge pickup, or the neck pickup and the middle pickup and the bridge pickup and the middle pickup as well, to get those kind of quack sounds out of it. That wasn't intentional by Fender. That was just a freak accident of somebody screwing around.
Yeah, I get you. I mean, it's not the way I usually play the guitar. It's like, especially because that guitar is such a studio guitar, right? It's like, it's on, I play a thing, it's off. You know what I mean? And honestly, the new SE is too pretty not to be my live guitar. So we'll see. I'll give it a shot just for you because it's a good suggestion. But it's not how the guitar normally gets used. And every time it's just, we keep talking about this, right? It's about comfort. It's about whatever is the easiest. And if every time I'm done and I go, fuck, it's one of those things that it just grinds on you after a while.
I'm telling you, just set it and forget it. And you might actually find that, that's actually pretty good. It really, really makes cleans kind of have a different kind of layer to them and a different kind of just dimension almost. It's very, very enhancing effect that you could try out. And I suggest anybody else tries that out too, with a 2 humbucker set that can also split. You mentioned that you're going to make that your other live guitar, the Roasted Maple Neck SE. What pickups are you going to put in that thing?
Dude, I haven't decided yet. I really haven't, and I'm kind of curious to see your new experiment here that you got going on with the Harley Benton Telly that you got. I know you're trying out some new pickups. Obviously, like I when I voted in your thing, I said Fishman mostly just because I wanted to see you not put Fishman in it. But it obviously doesn't have really room for the active stuff, so I can't do a Fishman in it. I've always kind of been a Duncan sucker, but Mojotone's been good to me in the past too, and I really, really liked their noiseless P90 that I threw in my Benton Jr. So part of me is like wanting to give them another shot too, and since I have Duncans in the other SE, I figure I should probably do something different. So I'm thinking Mojotones, but I'm not sold on anything. So you have to let me know how these new guys are, and maybe at that price, $50 for a set, maybe I'll give them a shot.
I'm going to give you some food for thought here. We were talking about the 77 guitar, right?
Mm-hmm.
They only make like 5 guitars a month now at this point, but the really high-end ones that they make, one of their standard options are the Mojotone 59s with the Mojotone harnesses, and those guys are picky as shit with everything. So, my curiosity, if the Telecaster was a 2 humbucker instrument, I think I would have given that a try after I had learned that. But I mean, I had to go with Lindy Fralin. I already had the pickup, so it was like, I'm not going to buy another set of humbuckers for the sake of having it when I have world-class ones that I don't need to split already here sitting in my closet. So I just found it interesting that that amazing Japanese company, they use the Mojotones in some of those custom Ex Robatos, and yeah, that shows me if they have the confidence in it, obviously, that they're not screwing around.
Yeah, it's weird. They feel like such a smaller name brand, but like they have some big people behind them. They got the Between the Buried and Me guys. You had them as signatures for a while. They've got some big names over there that do that. And then, still you go to their website and it's like they're selling amp parts and stuff, and it feels very like early 2000s, but I've been super happy with everything I bought from them. So like, That being said, I've been super happy with everything I bought from Duncan too, but it just kind of feels like, I've already got the Duncans in the other one, so I might as well try something else. But yeah, Mojotone's a good. It's where I'm leaning, unless you're absolutely blown away by these new guys. What were they called again?
Bootstrap.
I'll have to check out the site.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe how cheap they are.
Yeah.
It cost me $55 total to get a set of hand-wound Telecaster pickups that have actual quality wiring and cloth wiring on them. Not the really cheap shit. Like even the Duncans. When I ripped out the Jazzmaster, I had the Hot for Jazzmaster Seymour Duncan pickups in there, and the pickups are cloth the same way that Squier pickups are cloth, like the old ones. And I'm like, I knew I remembered that at the time, thinking like, oh, that's kind of cheap, but that's just something that rubs me the wrong way. And I mean, obviously, that doesn't like impact the tone or anything, but I don't know, that kind of I didn't love that.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's a little weird. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm only really seeing maybe on page 2. It's all single coils.
They got some humbuckers.
Single coils and P90s. I see. A bootstrap buckers. Yeah, and then they have a PAF humbucker too, but that's sold out. Yeah, I'll have to take a look. $40. I mean, part of me thinks $40 they probably aren't great, but for $40, I might as well figure it out,
Well, the other part of you might say, how the hell are all these companies charging $300-$400 a set if you can make something that's pretty good? Maybe it's all just profit margin, hype, idiots like me on YouTube. You know what I mean? I don't know. We'll have to see. But I think this will be a really interesting test. The only thing that kind of bums me out here is these have a 3-week lead time, and this normally wouldn't be a problem for me, but I'm selling both of the Telecasters I have. So...
Oh, you need something soon, huh? Yeah.
Well, I would like to. I'll have a Telecaster at some point, but I would like to immediately be able to compare it to a regular Fender Telecaster, no matter if it's a Japanese one, American one, whatever. Just like straight out of the box to be able to be like, okay, this guitar now, it was $140 plus the shipping, call it like $210, $50 for the pickups. I mean, I have the electronics here. I just got to build the actual harness for it. At the end of the day, call it $300 for everything to upgrade this guitar. How's it going to do? Like, and I feel like that's a really good, honest assessment of it.
You're going to, it's completely selfish of me, but I always want to somehow figure out how to get the logo off, especially after you put that kind of work into it and mod work. It's like, it's barely a Benton anymore, Like, I always feel like that should be part of the mod, right? Somehow peeling that logo off and just making it's just a custom telly that you have,
Okay, I'm going to answer your question, but before I answer that question, don't be that guy, Dave. Don't be that guy. I have no intentions of ripping it off. I will gladly let everybody know that that's a Harley Benton guitar because I don't give a shit. I don't care.
I don't care about it being a Harley Benton. I just hate their name and their logo is really what it is. It's like, it just looks bad,
I don't care that it's a Harley Benton. I just don't want to see that it's a Harley Benton. I hate their logo. Yeah. I hate their brand.
No. It is pure. It's purely a visual thing at this point. I'll tell everybody it's a Harley Benton. I just like, I don't know, come up with a nice little HB, like you could very easily do a very slick HB logo, but the little, signature thing, it's not a great look. There's been a few guitars that I have passed on specifically because they have real dumb looking headstocks with really dumb looking logos, and Harley Benton, the guitars are good enough to make me look past it.
The only ones that I can think of are the Heritage. I can't stand that headstock, and what's the other one? And pointy weapons. Those are the only headstocks. I'm like, I can't do those. Or like the Dean headstock. No.
Yeah, or the what was that company we were talking about a while ago? It starts with an R, and they have it's like big, and they're usually 2-layered.
Built.
Built does it too, and then I think is it like Revola, something like that. There's a few of them.
Revolta.
Yeah. There's a few of them that do that with like and I don't inherently mind the design of it. It's just that they're always like 8 times too big, you know? Like if they just kept it down, it just feels so weighted. Especially same thing with like Novo guitars, like their headstocks are massive, and it just, you look at it and it just feels like the weight of the design of the instruments off. I don't know. It's, you know, it's kind of like looking at a headless, like something about it just feels wrong, you know?
Oh, those aren't guitars. No, those aren't guitars. I'm not touching that.
Ooh, I didn't. We'll have to come back to that because I didn't know you had such a strong opinion about headless.
Well, that's completely aesthetic. That is completely aesthetic. They could be the greatest playing guitars in the world. I cannot play a guitar that has been Ichabod craned. It's not happening.
I kind of agree with you, even though I know so many people like who play them love them, you know, right? And there's so many guys who are so good that play headless guitars. Like there's got to be something to it, you know? And I mean, they must be incredibly light, right? With all the weight relief and like parts you're chunking off of it and everything. And there's probably something to that too. But yeah, there's something about it where you just like, it just doesn't feel, it feels like you're playing a toy or something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not even gonna go there. No, they're not for me. And also, Dave, you have to consider who I listen to versus who you listen to. I don't think I've ever seen anyone in any band that I actively really like play a headless guitar. We're just into different kinds of music, so I don't.
We are.
I don't think I've ever seen anybody play one live. Period. Outside of YouTube videos. So no.
I saw Scale the Summit a couple of years ago. They were both playing headless. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's just imagine me going to a funk show or a blues show and seeing a headless guitar. I'd probably be like, "There's something wrong here." Like,
I don't know. Somebody should do it. They would stick out, right? You'd have a cool little gimmick. You'd be like the blues guy with a headless guitar. You know,
it would almost be worth doing just to watch the people at the gear page have like a simultaneous brain aneurysm.
Yeah, that's what I mean. There's power in that, right?
I suppose so. Oh, man. All right, Dave, you got anything else? I think I want to keep this to the gear for tonight. And, yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse. We do that a lot.
No. Nope, yeah. Yes, we do. And, no, I don't have any more horses to beat.
Before we go, I am just going to say, God bless Carolyn. God bless Carolyn. If you are remotely as picky and just pick everything apart to death.
I do.
God, yeah. I cannot wait until we're like 20 years older and like our kids are hanging out. I just want to see how your kid ends up. I want to see if she ends up more like you or more
She's
like
going to
Carolyn.
have the same impeccable taste that I do with the incredible judginess. You know, it's just...
Or she's going to be the total opposite and she's going to loathe the fact that you're that way and she's going to actively want to not be like that. That's what I want to see. It's a 50-50.
Yeah,
you don't know.
It is. Yeah, it's all we can hope for our kids is to be the exact opposite of us, right?
Basically. All right, on that note, you guys, thank you so much for watching episode 16. We're going to be coming back with an album review for the next one. We were a little backed up, obviously. We didn't do a podcast last week because, of scheduling and stuff like that, so we'll have to wait on that. I did like that idea of doing that, but I want one of these bands to get back to me as far as, talking to them after the fact, because, that's part of the appeal. That's part of the appeal. So we're not totally canning it, just letting you know that it's not going to be here this week either. Tomorrow, it's my birthday. When you guys are watching it, it will be my birthday. So I have something planned for it, depending on if FedEx is worthwhile or if they're dicks. We'll have to wait. We'll have to wait and see. So
we're going to make the assumption, and I think it's probably a safe one, that they're not making it. It's FedEx, right? But either way, maybe it'll be a birthday miracle.
Always the optimist, Dave. Always the optimist.
Hey, if there's anyone who hates FedEx, it's you.
No, it's UPS. I hate UPS.
You hate them all. You hate them all.
Oh, FedEx is the only one that actually delivers when they say they're going to deliver. Right. DHL in Florida, forget. UPS, they just lose shit and then they say, we're not going to insure you. But now, you know what? We're on tangent. I'm out of here.
All right.
I will see you guys tomorrow for a video. Yeah. Take it easy. Thank you for watching.